I'm doing a Facebook Live to get myself kind of back into this game again. Um, yeah, now I have a new office because Wi-Fi doesn't seem to be cutting it with all the different things that are attached to the Wi-Fi. So I don't want any interruptions. You guys deserve to hear me without skipping, and I don't want the stress of feeling like I'm speaking and you missed like 2/3 of what I'm saying. So I am now downstairs and I'm going to stay downstairs. And my husband and I discussed it that we're going to transfer my office downstairs, and that's fine with me. We need to be hardwired. I need to be hardwired into the modem to make sure that my transmissions are uninterrupted with the best possible signal. And so, anyways, yesterday I was thinking like maybe I should do a video about that post regarding spirituality and faith and glomming on to different ideas as if nothing else existed, like in a tunnel way, and bring all of the politics, religion, and science where people get very attached to specific ideas at the expense of everything else. And like, no, Sunday is a day where people do worship, they do all their different religious, faithful activities. And it doesn't matter if you're Catholic, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Confucius, or spiritual. Um, all of that stems from biochemistry. And so I'm just thinking like, okay, I'm not gonna do it yesterday. Plus yesterday was a lot going on, and my husband got a new phone, and then all that drama around that, and oh my lord. But I'm glad everything got ironed out. So people can call him now if they want to. But I want to now really get clear and verbalize what I have noticed and the connections that I'm drawing around, yes, the Democrats, the Republicans, um, all the different religions, which, yes, this might be offensive to those of you that are very, very Christian, very Catholic, very Jewish. I was raised Jewish, so it wasn't like I was not raised in any kind of religion. It doesn't really matter what religion is. Religion is religion. You take a specific idea with a specific word, and yes, there's like the Bible, but the Bible is written by people, okay? People who are filtering their perspectives, or a person filtering their perspective, and it's now being used as a guide, which, yeah, okay, people are saying, yeah, now we're heading into the end times and revelations and all this stuff. And just like when you're doing the jelly juice and you're going through a an evolutionary experience, you're going to have revelations about certain things. You're going to have a releasing of the excess. You're going to have different epiphanies throughout the process, which is no different than the Bible, which is basically the epiphanies of humanity throughout the process of dying and reproducing. Okay? And so I knew there was always some scientific explanation to 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 explain why people do the things they do. Hi, sugar. I see you. Now you have to go lay down, okay? We already went outside and you already ate. So go ahead, lay down. Okay. So I knew there was always a scientific explanation of why people do the things they do. And I had a glimpse of it a couple years ago when I did lightly or heavily touch upon spirituality and ghosts, and why people go to church, and why is it that people feel really good when they go to church. And then of course I associated it with the biochemistry, the oxytocin, other types of hormonal, like dopamine and serotonin, hormonal types of experiences. And then a person would get joy from going to church, going to, listening to certain music. I've talked about music as also a way to bring up hormones, where some people feel really good and some people feel really bad when they listen to music. And so there's a reason why there's different types of music out there, because some people will have uh, a lower a lower production of a certain kind of hormone, and so this music is far more, it fulfills their hormonal imbalances. Okay, and so that then brings me to then all this stuff with religion and worship and glomming on to ideas, oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and then you have the dopamine and the serotonin, and then you have the cannabis people and anyone that does different types of drugs or antidepressants. And then I was googling the God gene, and I wanted to read about what scientists had to say about the God gene, because then you hear about Bill Gates, him trying to eradicate the God gene, and people are like, "Oh my God, they're flipping out, they're whatever," and I'm like, okay, I don't think Bill Gates is necessarily evil. I think that they know that there are 7 billion people in this world that are highly imbalanced, and they know they need to kind of release the excess without reenacting, the Holocaust, okay? And that's, and that probably might be a bad type of association, but there's got to be a way where you have a choice that is not someone else choosing who's going to live and who's going to die, because that's really, really like archaic and very primitive. And we are that advanced that we can give people the choice, even if they don't know they have a choice. We can give people the choice, we as a society, and a person will choose whether or not they're going to be able to handle the environment for the evolutionary upgrades that are happening. And that's what this virus is, and all the politics, and the elections and all of that. Those are forced evolutions that some of you will survive and some of you won't, because the stress is going to be too much for some people. Obviously, a few policemen passed away from the stress of the riots. Okay, so then I looked up the God gene, and it really clicked, because I've explored born again Christian people. Like I had family friends that are in a Jesus cult, or were in a Jesus cult in Hawaii, and they had their own trauma in their background. They had their own issues, and drug addictions, and then all that went to the wayside, and then Jesus and born again Christian and the Bible and their leader became everything, became the center focus of their life. It was as if they transferred their addictions and all the hormone releases from the drug that, yes, can be very, very destructive, to then a person who ran a cult of which the Bible and Jesus was the premise, and the way they perceived what the Bible was saying. And then that cult actually was disbanded because the leader of the cult was molesting a few of the kids in there. And so there you're like, okay, when you transfer from a drug addled background to then transferring to a type of religion, and that religion then abused these people, because when you're going from one extreme to the other, destruction is always going to be in the background, because there's no middle ground. And then also too, I mean, everyone has different levels of trauma in their life, whatever they are. And some people, when they are coping with trauma in the background, they can still be a very, very productive member in society. They could be very influential. They could have many very good ideas, but they are still reacting from trauma, of which then some religions or religion has been kind of that little placeholder, that oasis for them to be able to release the hormones and get that satisfied. And so it's not just one religion. See, I don't want to be just poking at only one religion. I just happen to have an experience with the born again Christians, a specific cult sect that was in Hawaii. But they are no different than so many different levels of people's attachments to very specific ideas. And so that also explains then the scientific at the cellular level between, like, loose bonds like ionic bonds, and then tight bonds like covalent bonds, and then the family unit. And so maybe you're not religious, you don't have any type of specific worship of a religion or an idea, or like Confucius or Shintoism, right? but you have a family unit, and so you have kids, you have parents, you have people that like your husband or your wife. Those are tight bonds that could almost come off like worship. Like you kind of see me just like gush about my husband. That's a type of worship. Now, am I actually worshiping? No, I mean it's a level of worship that isn't very destructive because I have established my boundaries. He's established his boundaries. We're in a cohesive symbiotic relationship where we are pooling resources together so we can survive. However, we could probably both survive separately if we had to. Okay. But we chose to be together. And so, yes, there is a type of covalent bond, but he may be more covalent in his way of looking at things. And I might be more ionic, loose bonds. Okay. Ionic is that positive, negative, covalent, has more of the magnetic forces to really coalesce very tightly, because there are looser magnetic bonds and there are tighter magnetic bonds. It depends on just the mass and all of that, and so you can look up that in physics. But loose bonds, ionic bonds, are when you have the ability, you are still bonded to society. So when someone lives by themselves, or they don't have a husband or wife, or they don't have a specific religion, but they still need society, they may live by themselves, maybe with a dog, and they still are getting utilities, they still go to the grocery store, they still are interacting with people, but not in such a close way. Maybe they have a few friends, but the few friends are not like in their business 24/7, calling them every day, or at their house every day, or tagging each other on Facebook every day. It's like they have enough space to where they do come together when they need to on specific common projects that they might be working on. Because what is a relationship when you have a common project, a common thing that you're working on that forces you, not forces you, but you choose to interact, whether it's every day or like once every couple weeks. And I'm more of a once every couple weeks kind of person. I don't like someone in my business every single day. My husband's in my business every single day. That's enough covalent bonding for me. So the relationships that I hold are more of the ionic, because it does allow me more freedom to not have somebody in my ear 24/7. Now my husband's in my ear 24/7, not so much 24/7, but he's in my ear more times than not. But I can handle his energy, and so it's fine. It's a balance. But if I had, 50 of someone like my husband, you would, and they were all under the same, thought process and the same belief system, it would be very hard to have anyone come in and penetrate. And that's like cliques. That's like people in different socioeconomic areas. That's like cliques, like in high school, where you have the jocks and you have the nerds and you have the athletes. They're tight bonds, and it's very hard to penetrate them. Very hard, unless you really show that you're so much like them and they find you, you know, an addition to their group. But it's very hard to have someone with a different idea penetrate very tight covalent bonds. And it's true even for a person. You have certain ionic bonds, you have covalent bonds, and it will take a thought process for a person to shed some excess covalent bonding, like excess fat. Okay? So now I'm bringing it into the micro from the macro. And so that's this whole thing with politics, religion, and science. It's all about loose bonds, tight bonds, and ideas, and people, places, and things that people are so attached to. Reactive attachment. I learned about reactive attachment a long time ago when I was trying to figure out why I feel so different. And there is war baby syndrome, there's trauma that goes with being a starving orphan in Vietnam and then being adopted into, an American society. And there's a whole adaptation that goes along with that. And some of the behavioral types of manifestations is reactive attachment. But I think everybody has some type of reactive attachment to specific things at different levels. Just some are more clinical, some are more in depth, and so it does warrant a clinical diagnosis of reactive attachment. Now, I was never diagnosed with reactive attachment, but there are some characteristics of that when a person is growing up in a society that they, were thrust into from a very highly stressed society, their ability to adapt can be kind of cattywampus. So, and then development, and then all that stuff that goes along with growing up with PTSD in the background. So that's when I was Googling the God gene, and Then Bill Gates was talking about that in some of the vaccines and some of those videos that were censored by Facebook because people were taking it out of context, which I can understand. People, they don't know the bigger picture. They're going to think something is evil without really knowing what it is. So then I looked up the whole thing with the God gene. I Googled a bunch of stuff, and then I wrote this: the God-based spirituality gene, because genes are genes. They are your DNA that is being influenced by people, places, and things. And sometimes those influences stick. They're not. They're more covalent. They're more bonded. So you will have that manifestation, that influence. Just stick. It won't like leave or mutate or go back to what it originally was. It'll stay there, and then you'll be passed down to your offspring through meiosis. So depression and spirituality may go hand in hand. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin bonding release may also be the body's defense to offset immediate deadly qualities of depression. Okay, so that's why you don't give chocolate to a dog, because dogs have more oxytocin. They're so loyal. They bring out just the love. They bring out all this hormones, this bonding, this love hormone. And so when your body doesn't have, when your body isn't making it naturally on its own on a level that that is balanced, then you're going to look for things that are going to trigger that hormonal release. Okay, so that's why some people get dogs, because it helps relieve the stress, depression, other types of stuff. And so that's why some people use therapy dogs, because they need that hormonal release. They need that trigger, and dogs do trigger that. As well as worship, faith, spirituality, looking for a savior like Trump, like Biden, like a public or like a political party, like a religion. I don't care what you call it. Okay, you can rationalize a religion slash worship slash this, but when you are that attached to a religion or attached to an idea, not just like life and death are just very specific physical characteristic states of being. You're living or you're dying. That's it. It's just physical stuff. And then you have all the words that explain what living and dying is relative to perspective, relative to your biochemistry. And then there's all this chatter about it, the distractions that take you away from the fact that you are living or you're dying. There's a specific science behind both, and you either follow the science of life or you follow the science of death, and the outcome is the intention. And now you're given a choice, okay? But not everybody knows that they have choices, because they are so bonded to an idea that you can't penetrate their belief system. Okay, but worship, faith, spirituality, savior, and religion might be a byproduct, as the hormones triggering the bonding mechanisms are very prevalent. Then there's environmental triggers. Okay, so yeah, when you, so depression and depression could come from a myriad of things. It could come from PTSD. It could come from the fact that you're not able to bounce back from a breakup or from a violent event or from an accident. Some people get into accidents that, yeah, maybe they are paraplegic, and so they're depressed at the fact that they can't walk. All right, and so then for them to cope with that, they turn to specific things that uplift them to make them feel good, because of the fact that they are at a deficit and they have no power to bounce back from that 100%. And that's pretty much everybody out there, because everyone's dying and reproducing out there. Everybody has some level of depression that they are coping with and using things as a coping mechanism. So this explains so much and confirms what I already knew deep down inside. Because I knew that religion, and I asked people's backgrounds before I would really start the Jelly Juice, because when I was in college in San Francisco, City College of San Francisco, and I went to a multi-religion faith spirituality class, where comparative religion, where we had to go to different places with different temples and gatherings and learn about other people's religion. Now, I didn't ask everyone's background because it's really none of my business, but I've talked to people who have, who are in those areas. Some people they were just raised in that. Okay, and that's that tight covalent bond of some families where there's no one that's going to be able to penetrate, and they are deeply rooted in traditions. Okay, And so that, and then there's also PTSD and trauma in very deeply rooted traditions. And so that's probably why there are a lot of holy wars, a lot of religious wars, and why we have a lot of wars with politics, because people have this tight bond, and if somebody tries to penetrate it with a different idea, it's a fight or flight type of reaction to somebody else's ideas. And that's what I've dealt with, with the Jilly Juice, is I'm now trying to penetrate people who have bonded to the fact that they think they should die and that salt is evil. And oh my God, it's been a hell. And yes, the medical establishment and the holistic establishment is a type of religious type of cult that is very hard to penetrate. And so, and the fact that I don't do consultations, and the fact that I don't guide people from beginning to end on a daily basis is very hard for people. Because I've had people ask me, Jillian, I'll pay you 75 or I'll pay you this much money if you just be this counselor, so when I'm having a hard time I can call you up and I can just and throw up. And at first I was like, they paid me $75, but it wasn't like every single time. I don't know what I worked out with them, but they were calling me a lot or sending me messages, and then I'm like, I can't do this. This is insane. But that's the religious worship. That's the PTSD that's looking to glum because they're in the process of healing, and it's tough, and they're so used to having somebody at the speed of the dial right there waiting to just be this vessel to just take up all of their stress. And I don't know how counselors and doctors and lawyers and all these different people who are for the public who are very imbalanced, how they really handle it, and some don't. I mean, some people can be a vessel, and then you see after years and years of their profession just wear on them, and they're a shell of a person, or they've just been completely cannibalized by all our clients. So I don't do that. Jilly Juice doesn't do that, and I make sure that anyone that even emulates someone that is a charismatic, that wants to be that guru for people in some way, that are like tractor beams, I can sense that, and I'm like, I don't want any spiritual advisors in my group, really, that profess to be spiritual advisors. I just want some real people, not those that are in that profession. So that's why I am the way I am around certain types of people out there that are in the healing energy world, that are in the faith and in the religious world. Now, I notice a few people that they're in the faith religious world on my page, and they do promote J Juice. And that's fine. They have their belief system, but the common ground that we have is the Jilly Juice and Indefinite Life, and that's it. They can believe in Jehovah's Witness, and that's fine. The Bible, all the different scriptures, that's great. If there's something in the scriptures that speaks to you on your journey with your J Juice, that's a way to reach those of the people in her world or someone else. So everybody has their way to speak to other people's listening. But what Jilly Juice is trying to do is to kind of make a common language that unifies everyone, so you don't speak jargon and a person in this area won't be able to understand what this person is saying because they don't have that background or all that. So I try to speak as plain as possible. So that's why I talk about J Juice and why I don't speak in too much dialect, in too much jargon, and why I don't subscribe to any religion, any worship type thing, any political party. I have to take a middle ground, life or death. That's it. That's the only side that I take when it comes to life, because I want to live. I don't want to die. But everything else is it's just extremes. And so that's where I'm now guiding my group to be more in the middle ground. Okay? And everyone's going to have their journey throughout it. And I'm fine with that, as long as the end result is that we take a middle ground at some point. So I knew this could explain why people of all cultures turn to religion, spirituality, looking for a hero, a guru. Trauma and other PTSD are the catalysts. They need the oxytocin release to cope. Why they're looking for a Messiah. Why they're looking to Jesus, to whoever, Yahweh. Now, I'm not speaking blasphemy. I'm not diminishing what it is that people are looking as the answer, but I'm saying there's an actual scientific explanation. that it is a bonding thing. Okay, and I never really could understand it until now. And so here's a scientific thing. There will always be a scientific explanation for human beliefs, because your beliefs don't come from a vacuum. They come from a biochemical release. Your hormones. People have given you words. Society, school, the government, different people have given you words to explain what things are. There's a common foundation we all work from, and then people's explanation, their perspective of that common foundation. So depression and spirituality have been shown to share multiple physiological risk factors, including the preliminary suggestion of common genetic markers for risk. In this study, we investigate a subset of those genetic markers that in previous studies have been linked both with depression and with spirituality. Okay? So whereas the majority of research has examined genetic links to depression and spirituality in community and convenience samples, the current study investigates these genes in a high-risk sample, namely a sample of adult offspring and grandchildren of people who have severe depression and matched controls, offering a smaller sample size but stronger signal for a link between any single gene and its phenotype. Previous research has shown that risk of depression differs by parental risk status, that is, individuals with a parent or grandparent diagnosed with depression are at least 2 to 3 times likely to become depressed than children with depression without a depressed parent. So your background, and I've had people say that they've had suicide in their family. There was domestic violence, there was incest, there was all these different things that go on in their background, and then they're in these specific professions, so they can fully understand why they are who they are, why they act the way they act, and then that's how they're able to identify with their patients. But then they still have to have some kind of neutrality. But it's very hard to be neutral when you have that in the background and dealing with a patient who has almost the same background as you. And so so even therapists out there have their own therapists to make sure that they're not transferring their stuff onto their client. And I'm telling you, or projecting or whatever. And I'm telling you, I don't know how, it's impossible not to. It's impossible not to. And so it's interesting, the psychological and psychiatry world, the people that are in it, and then how they kind of police themselves. It's kind of a trip. So, further, this is intergenerational risk is greatest for children with both depressed grandparents and parents. So this is the thing. And so that's, so that's why, like, Chris Watts, that guy that annihilated his family, now he's turned to Jesus and turned to the Bible or turned to some religion in the prison. There is no coincidence why the prison system has a lot of born-again Christians. Okay? They've got to find some way to find joy and to go and transfer their addictions to something different, to find, something to worship, to find something to glom onto. And so it's like, then you're like, well, then if you don't have all these things, the spirituality and this and that, then, what joy is life? Oh, there's so much joy in life. There's so much joy in learning things. There's so much joy in understanding people, place, and things, being able to explain and articulate. I mean, I find so much joy in learning about the world that I live in. Okay, I find so much joy in rising and, rising to the level of the next evolution, whatever it is, beating the odds. I mean, that needs to be something that people could focus on if they're not going to the bars. They have all these different issues and they want to overcome them, and now they don't have to go to the bars to go in and anesthetize themselves, or, and so that used to be something they do. Now they don't. Now maybe they can turn to J juice and be addicted to life instead of addicted to alcohol or cannabis or other things. So this really explains a lot, and this does explain from the micro to the macro. And so that's another thing that I have to be, that I must be aware of in the background when I'm writing, because that does explain politics, religion, and science. That explains it to the utmost. We have so many people at different levels of PTSD glomming onto ideas, and they're easily triggered. And then you have the system trying to draw out the extremists, because I know there are people that everyone has some kind of trauma. Some people are so extreme that they act it out and they break laws because of that trauma. They're easily influenced by someone. You could say that Trump is bad, but maybe Trump was used as a tool to draw out the extremists. Maybe Biden is used as a tool to figure out who it is that are easily manipulated and have a lot of issues. They're going to be looking to all these different medical methodologies or not be looking toward those medical methodologies and are still going to expire because they're not going to have what it takes to handle the biomolecular thermodynamics called evolution and living through your symptoms, your evolution. And so, yeah, so what I do is like, I don't care who's in office. I just, look for the indicators, stay out of harm's way. And that's the whole point of Chili Juice, is to get off the battlefield, look for indicators, stay out of harm's way, reinforce the body, mind, and spirit, reinforce my blood vessels, not turn to synthetic vasodilators and vasoconstrictors like holistic supplements, like drugs, like any of the different remedies that are out there that give people temporary relief. People need to face their evolution, which is facing their demons, not hide, confront what they've ran away from, and evolve and push on to the next level and get your life back. When you're only working from like 60%, that 40% is so valuable that you don't even know that's valuable because you've never had that opportunity to even experience that 40% that's been missing in your life. People are born with 40% deficiencies. Now, where do I get this percentage? I mean, it's just percentage. Some people have 20% deficiencies. Some people have 50% deficiencies. And they think that's normal. That's what, and we can't tell them it's not normal because they would not know anything but what they have been experiencing. But if you're dying and reproducing, you're always going to be working from a deficit. The whole point of Chili Juice is to influence and promote mitosis at the micro level. Not so much meiosis. Remember, meiosis, which is sexual reproduction, that builds nations. That builds armies. That builds power. Okay? When you have so many people reproducing, you are creating people who do live a long time. It's not like you're creating rabbits that only have a year, life expectancy. No, when you're not doing JJs, you have between, 1 and maybe 120. But now the average is about maybe 70, 60, 70. You're lucky if it's 80, 90, or 100. There's a few people that are over 100. Okay? But the average lifespan, so that's a lot of life that any government can use for a very temporary type of thing, to do CRISPR gene editing, to experiment on the population, to see how they can make a superhuman, or a very smart human, or a very, artistic, creative human, or someone they could use for TV to influence the masses in a specific way. Okay? So the whole point of Chili Juice is not to be one of those that are CRISPR edited, that have been, manipulated to a specific thing. That you are now going to choose your life based upon your biochemistry and the fact that you have tapped into potential indefinite life and mitosis, which is basically telomere lengthening. That your life isn't revolving around meiosis and reproducing and having a bunch of babies. Okay? Because what you're doing is you're nation building, which it's been encouraged. That's what the baby boom was about, was nation building. Was that really like the actual tagline? Yeah, the baby boom is about nation building. But that's the outcome, is that you have now a population, a workforce, a magnetic force that can be used to advance human society. Because when you have 7 billion or 325 million people with different strengths and different weaknesses, you can cherry pick the best minds and bodies and spirits and then put them with other minds, bodies, and spirits and make a collective superhuman, like you see, like maybe at NASA or other types of very powerful companies. They're very influential. They take the best and the brightest with the most money, or the best and the brightest, and exploit their talents to then advance that company. And so that's why some companies are going to be, around for a while, because they figured out that formula. Their recruiters know, they have an eye, and all the different testing, helps them to do that. All the different cognitive testing, the IQ testing, the entrance testing, even in the military, the ASVAB, all that. If you can get into like MIT or get into Harvard and all that, is because you have a very specific strength that they're looking for to then add to a company to advance that company. Because remember, college and corporations work hand in hand together. They are feeders into each other. Okay? And then some people go off the deep end and turn into like the Unabomber or something, right? Or they turn into Charles Manson. So, because there's been a lot of experiments in these universities on humans that then caused the 1970 serial killers. Okay, so that's no coincidence, because there's a lot of experimentation going on in the 1970s with drugs and everything else, CIA, MK Ultra, and then you have like Charles Manson, and you have that other dude Bundy and some other stuff. Okay, so it's no surprise that all that stuff happens, but you as a person on the Jilly Juice can be able to step outside of that and be able to create your own life, not try to see where the government can use you or where academia can use you in this area, that area. And some people do want their kids to be used by the government. They're like, oh yeah, my daughter or my son has this strength, and we're going to get them into this and this and see if they excel, and then maybe they'll be famous, or maybe they'll be picked up by some company that's going to exploit their talents and use them up and throw them away. And that's kind of what our society is about, is using people up and throwing them away. What if it didn't have to be that way? Okay? And so that's why JJ's is so important, because it does take the worship out of things. But I mean, if you're so attached to your religion and you're so attached to your belief system, it's going to be hard. I mean, I was raised Jewish, and I've had different belief systems. Remember, I was in the conspiracy world. I was worshiping Alex Jones for many, many years. Now, is that the same thing as Jesus or I don't know, the Jewish religion or Catholicism or anything like that? It could be. It has similar characteristics. And I'm like, oh my God. But he was allowed to proliferate for many, many years. So he has definitely changed uh, the way people think about stuff, and potentially radicalize them. And then there's Donald Trump, who's like, okay, we have a right population that needs to be radicalized. We're going to draw out the extremists. And so Jilly just says, okay, you're going to eventually be like, okay, you're going to eventually take a middle ground. I'm thinking, I don't want to tell someone that when you do Jilly Juice, you're going to lose all of your beliefs in Jesus and Jehovah and Yahweh and all these different things. I'm not saying that. But I'm going to say you're probably going to take a middle ground somewhere, and you're not going to speak in jargon. You're not going to use your religion, your scripture, all your stuff as a way to explain. You'll find a way to speak in plain English without hiding behind very, archaic ways of speaking, where you're going to want the masses to understand where you think, not just those that are in your circle, but you're going to want everyone to understand where you're coming from. And now, so you do have people that are in that scripture or in that jargon that you're trying to reach. So the only way you can really reach them is through scripture to explain what JJ's does. Okay, maybe JJ's reinforces what you already believe, and so scripture is the best way for you to get to the people that you're trying to reach. However, it's good to go, and some people are very good at speaking both sides, where they can speak plain English, like Jilly Juice language, and some people can use the scripture to explain Jilly Juice, and that's fine, because that's your audience. I'm trying to speak plain. I think the people that do speak specific dialects in English language could also understand my plain English, and so it just depends on who your audience is and what you're trying to say. So I don't know what the future is going to hold for those that are very, very, very heavily religious or heavily spiritual. It's an unfolding, it's an evolution, an adaptation. You're going to have epiphanies. Some of you are going to stuff your epiphanies because or not acknowledge them because it does go against what you believe in. And so you don't want to seem like now you're a non-believer, or you've lost your love or your commitment to your religion, and I understand that too. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, what's in store for those that are very, very worshipful, very, very religious, very, very stuck, covalently stuck to a belief system, whatever it is. Okay? All I know is that I find peace in taking the middle ground in our society, but I still believe in life, indefinite, and mitosis. And and I don't need to join any groups. You know, I mean, jelly juice fits into everything. It can be an adjunct to everything. It could be in addition to everything. Just like they say Buddhism can be attached to everything, okay, but I don't believe everything in Buddha, because they believe people should die at some point, or death, or whatever, reincarnation. Which, okay, I'm sure that's potentially, but I don't even want people to believe in reincarnation. I don't want people to die. If you stay alive, don't live for reincarnation. Don't try to come back as something else. You be who you are today and enhance it. Okay, so jelly juice can be an adjunct to everything, to where then the whatever things that you're whatever may go to the wayside, and then you're just living. You know, you're doing, once you're doing jelly juice, you're exploring everything. Whether it's yoga, great, fine, but make sure you do jelly juice, and you really heal and seal. Don't be doing yoga and not be doing jelly juice. Don't be doing yoga and doing jelly juice if yoga is really taking more out of you and causing more destruction, and you haven't healed and sealed. But you could be doing yoga, you could be doing, bicycling, you could be playing the piano, you could be learning how to put a car together, you could be learning how to write the most excellent sentence. I mean, there's so many things out there. If you just go into a college syllabus, or go into a college, menu of classes, you can see everything you can learn out there, and then you can do it on your own. I mean, there's so many things out there. You know how many instruments there are in an orchestra? You know how many tools to learn, how many heavy equipment you can learn, you know how many things. There's so much to learn that, you know, that it's endless. Okay? And so that's what life could be about, is learning everything in the world and still staying alive, not just be in one profession and be so good at it, be a journeyman, and then die as a journeyman in, welding or pipe fitting or something else. That you can actually diversify and move, be an ionic bond, not a covalent bond. So what I see in our society when you're dying and reproducing is that people are living from the covalent bond perspective, and they're not very ionic. They're not able to really move around freely, picking up new ideas, dropping off old ideas, and just being a very fluid person. There's a lot of people that are very stuck and stayed. Okay, and Julie Juice is trying to reach those that are not stuck and stayed, that have the ability, or want, or have the desire to be fluid. All right, you guys have a good day. I've got to, eventually I'm gonna get my office figured out. Eventually I'm gonna really just set a space for creativity. Right now I'm just kind of like getting used to now my ideas and where I'm coming from. And so when I go back and read what I wrote from the last 3 or 4 or 5 months, and just like, oh my God, I gotta really rewrite this. So there's a lot I gotta do that's ahead of me. So I plan to submit my manuscript probably around March or April, and the book is not quite come out until potentially the summer of 2021. Okay, so just wanted to give you guys a heads up, a realistic managing your expectations of when this book's going to come out, because it's going to be in color. It's going to be through a different publisher, and it's going to encapsulate everything that are in the other books, not everything, but then with new information from this perspective. And it's going to be the only book in the Julie Juice collection, aside from maybe one more other that's going to be like, that'll be down the road. But it'll still be Julie Juice, but it won't be so long. But this book is going to be like the handbook of our society, acknowledging the Freemasons, the Vatican, the life side, the death side, people's issues with the New World Order, that there is good in all of that stuff, and even those that run our society, there's good in those people. But remember, the people who have imbalances are going to be what people focus on. They're not going to see really the good stuff, because good to people is all relative. They're only going to see all the stuff that's been plastered all over the internet and people's blog sites of their perspective, their hatred towards someone else's ideas and thought process. And that's the covalent bond speaking. The ionic bonds won't have anything bad to say about the Vatican, about the Freemasons, about anything. We know imbalanced people exist, and there are laws that are in place to hold them accountable. It doesn't always happen. The justice system isn't 100%, and that's where people have to then be personally accountable for their children and be personally accountable for themselves so they don't end up being a victim and then blame it on whatever religion this person who is a perpetrator holds, because that's kind of what's going on. Is people are Freemasons, they are Catholic, Christian, Jewish, this, that, whatever, and they also have imbalances, and that's how then religions and belief systems get a bad rap, because there's a lot of imbalanced people who also represent different groups of people. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.